Welcome back. Are there any questions, Mariska?
Yes, Joop, I have 3 questions at the moment. And the first question is, how can we uncover truth within conflicts where opinions are strongly in the foreground? What is needed for that?
Yes. Well, I think especially if we start thinking about this question from Theosophy, I think that since everything in this type of situation is polarized, you should try to seek for the common ground in general. And well, one of the simple things, without involving Theosophy yet in it, is that, of course, when there is a conflict between people, that you are all human beings striving for the same things in life, like a peaceful life, a happy life, and so on. So you should always try to look for a common ground. Now, if we involve also the Theosophical view on this, is that all life is stemming from the same one life. So there is a oneness of all life. We all come from the same source, the boundless life, the one life, and we all flow back in this life periodically, cyclically. So we are all expressions of this one life, so there is no need, although we may differ and have different qualities and have differences of opinions or ideas, it doesn't mean that we should fight each other, because actually it is two parts of the one life that are having a conflict. So we should, as self-conscious beings, find modes to become more aware of this oneness of this life and act as real human beings, making use of this thought that we are all exponents of this one life, and we can try to think of something that makes it work, that we can live together. So there is a truth behind this polarized situation, a common ground, and everybody who wants to search for a solution for a conflict should try to recognize that there should be a common ground. And the Theosophy says this is the one life. I think that is my short answer. Yeah?
Thank you. I think it's a clear answer. I've got another question. What is the difference between universal and ethical?
Yeah, that's a very good question. When I described the focus of a philosophical approach of a certain problem or question, then I said that in philosophy you try to understand the essence of a certain issue, and if you understand the issue of a certain problem, then you will be able, and if you see the solution of it, then you will be able to see this principle of concept, to recognize it everywhere in time and space. So that makes it universal, and universal means that it is valid for whether you see it on the scale of our terrestrial plane, or whether you see it in the universe somewhere. Like, for instance, a certain astronomical fact that can be applied to something here on Earth, or something in space that we can observe via our astronomical instruments, for instance. That makes it universal. It is the same idea on whatever scale you look at it. An ethical principle is that it has to do with valuing the development of different living beings, whether they have equal possibilities, because all living beings are according to Theosophy and according to the third proposition of the secret doctrine, are equal in their essence, so they are of equal value also. And if you think about a certain approach in society for that affects different groups of people in society, then the ethical aspect is whether the approach or solution for a certain problem is defined in such a way that it does not hamper the development of whatever group you are looking at. Everybody should be treated as equal human beings and have the possibilities to develop their potentialities. And it is only ethical when nobody is, let's say, hampered in their development less or more than another human being or group of human beings. You have to weigh the effects for all living beings involved to see whether they are equally being treated. I think that's typical ethical. Yeah.
It's a clear answer to me.
Okay.
I have a third question in the mail. You talked about cyclicity in nature, and the question is: are natural disasters occur also cyclically, and can therefore be predicted?
Well, in general, I think that with our scientific approaches, there are a lot of cyclic events in nature that we can predict better and better, I would say. Like, for instance, if you look at our meteorological models that we have, I'm always surprised how accurate these models can predict temperatures, rain or droughts, and so on. So with an increased knowledge of phenomena in nature, we are able to predict, let's say, short-term type of things like weather forecasts. Mm-hmm. Also, for instance, there is an increasing knowledge in terms of earthquakes and so on. Although within a certain scope this is possible to make predictions because there is knowledge about the crust of the earth and how there are tensions building up, and through certain measurements we can predict things. But there are also cycles that we are just about to discover and are not known yet, although there may be certain cyclic motions that that do exist, but that we are still on the brink to discover. And especially in Theosophy, you find quite some information about cyclicity on longer periods of times, like, for instance, cycles of 100 years, or a famous cycle of 26,000 years, the so-called precession cycles, which gives other phenomena on a longer time period of changes in, let's say, cultures that exist on Earth, or also changes in on the crust of the Earth, in the water level, and so on. So there are facts, or there are ideas to be found in Theosophical literature that give ideas about longer term cyclicities that are not based on real models but on knowledge that is covering both physical knowledge but also knowledge that is of the non-physical world. And that has to do with all kinds of force fields, of which our terrestrial domain is a part of. For instance, certain force fields that also science knows which are valid in the solar system, for instance, but that is still on the physical plane. But there are also force fields and cyclicities in these forces that we are not aware of yet, but still play an important role in variations in life on our planet. And also how we as humanity play a role in this whole total life construct of our planet Earth, where we as humanity play a very important role in terms of when we look at the physical globe of our planet, then we as humankind play a very important role in terms of, as a human kingdom, we actually are representing the Buddhic aspect of, or should be representing, I should say, the Buddhic aspect, so the more compassionate and intuitive aspect of life on this planet. So we can actually, from this point of view, be considered as the stewards of the planet Earth. And that is a very, you find this expression also, for instance, in the Christian Bible, but also in other important books of the world, that we as humanity, with the way we think, with the way we build up our mentality as humankind, we play a very important role how the rest of all life on and off this planet Earth evolves in the coming centuries. And so that is also something that goes in cycles, because Theosophy explains that in various evolutionary periods certain aspects and sub-aspects of the consciousness of mankind is being developed, and these cycles in time are also known. I'm not going into details now, but so there are cycles that are known as cycles of evolution, and they are based on development of certain aspects, like for instance what I just mentioned, that the intuitive or Buddhic aspect of our thinking plays a very important role and is also a very important aim for us as human beings to develop in order to be a very good steward of life on Earth. I think I'll leave it with that.
Was a lot of new information on this question. Thank you.
Yeah, and thank you for the question.
Before this question, we had the question about the difference between universal and ethical. And someone else now asks, is acting universal always ethical?
Well, that depends. That's a very good question, because understanding a universal principle doesn't mean automatically that you act according to your own insights or conscience in an ethical way. So understanding the universality doesn't not mean that you make the right choice to think and act on the basis of this universal insight in an ethical way. You can also misuse it by thinking, oh, this is the principle, but I use it for my own personal gain, because I understand it so well, I can make use of it to for my own benefit or for my own interest, or to manipulate my surroundings. And that is, of course, not an ethical way of applying this insight. So universality, or understanding the universality of a certain truth, is not the same as having an ethical vision and acting in an ethical way.
Clear?
Yeah.
Then I go to the last question.
Yeah.
You talked about reincarnation, and I've got now a question. Is it true that a chemical atom re-embodies?
Well, in fact, if you take the first proposition of the secret doctrine, so that is about the boundless life, the one life, based on that first proposition, if you think this through, then your final conclusion can be that everything that is there in the universe is life, is alive. And that means that if we look at the chemical atoms which compose the physical nature as we have mapped it so far in science, our expressions or the chemical atoms are in fact the vehicles of a living being that we may call, for instance, life atoms, but in Theosophy we mean with the name life atoms the consciousness that is working behind a certain living beings, like a chemical atom. It's just an example. So it is used as you could also rephrase it differently and use the word conscious center, which is embodying itself in the form of a chemical atom. So yes, also chemical atoms re-embody themselves, and they do it compared to our lifespans. For an average human being, let's say 60, 70 or 80 years. But for a chemical atom, this is only a fraction of a second. So they have a very high frequent cyclicity of re-embodiment. So the smaller the beings become, smaller, not in the physical sense, but the less developed the consciousness, the higher the frequency of re-embodiment of those living beings. Yeah.
Clear to me. These were the questions, so let's go to the second part of your lecture.
Thank you very much for your interesting questions, because it really is giving us the opportunity to discuss this and exchange more about the subject. We will continue now with the second part. And now we are going to see how we can recognize the idea or the concept of cyclicity and reincarnation in the various religious traditions in the world. After that, in the third part, we will look at philosophy and science. But now we will focus on the 5 main major religious traditions in the world. And before we have a look at that, we will have a look at the model of a living being that is used in all these religious traditions in the world. In all these traditions, we see that the model of a living being is made up of 3 parts. And in fact, if you study those scriptures, like the Bible or the Quran and so on, or the Vedas, then you see that this threefold model applies not only to human beings, but also to whole solar systems or atoms or Milky Way. So it is a very universal model. And we use this model quite a lot in our lectures. I will focus now on man as a threefold thinker, but it has a more general application. So here we see a picture with 3 circles, and the top circle, the white one, is representing an imperishable and unmanifested spiritual core of the living being. And when it concerns a cosmic being, it is often referred to in literature as the first logos. If we apply this model to a human being, it is indicated most of the time by spirit or monad. Then we have an intermediate nature, that is the yellow circle in the middle, and that intermediate nature is a limited consciousness expression of that spiritual core. And when it concerns a cosmic being, it is referred to as the second logos, and when it is concerning a human being, it is referred in a lot of texts as the soul, characterized by human thinking. And the lowest circle, the third one, is a vehicle through which that consciousness can manifest itself in the material world. When it concerns a cosmic being, it's called the third logos, the manifested logos. And when it concerns a human being, it's called the body. The essence of this model is that the core of every being is imperishable and gives continuity to the life of a being over all its re-embodiments. And this being expresses itself cyclically through a limited consciousness that uses a vehicle or a body for its manifestation. This process of cyclical manifestation is the process of re-embodiment, and if we talk about animals or human beings, we also may speak of reincarnation. So for humans we distinguish the spiritual core, the spirit. We distinguish the soul, characterized by human thought, with an imperishable part, which is characterized by universal thinking, and a transitory part, that is the thinking focused on the outer physical world. And then we have the vehicle or the body, and of course we all know that this is transitory or perishable. In the next lecture we will discuss it a little bit more in detail again. Now we will begin in our search for the truth of reincarnation in religion. We will start initially with Theosophy, the universal core of all great religious and philosophical systems, which our modern age is represented by Theosophy. Theosophy has three so-called propositions. I just mentioned already one of them. The first is the boundlessness of life. One boundless life that is the source and deepest essence of all manifested life. Then we have the second proposition, and this proposition is about cyclicity, and it runs as follows. The eternity of the universe in toto is a boundless plane, periodically the playground of numberless universes, incessantly manifesting and disappearing, called the manifesting stars and the sparks of eternity. The appearance and disappearance of worlds is like a regular tidal ebb of flux and reflux. The third proposition is about the fundamental identity and the progressive evolution of all beings during these successive periods of manifestation. We will successively try to discover the cyclicity, the periodic appearance and disappearance of life in Christianity, Judaism, Islam, Hinduism and Buddhism. We start with Christianity. Christianity has as its holy book the Bible, consisting of the Old and the New Testament. Let's have a look at the New Testament. Various texts in the New Testament show that it was considered very common in the time of Jesus Christ to assume reincarnation. The first example is about the case of the blind born man. You can find it in John 9. Now, as Jesus was passing by, he saw a blind man from birth. A man blind from birth, sorry. And his disciples asked him, "Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind?" And Jesus answered, "Neither this man nor his parents sinned, but this happened so that the works of God would be displayed in him." The disciples' question indicated that there were only two possibilities for the man's blindness. First, or he had already sinned before he was born, that is to say, he had lived before, or secondly, that his parents were guilty of something or other that caused the blindness. That the idea of pre-existence and possible reincarnation occurred to the disciples indicates that it was a generally accepted theory among the Jews of that time. You could say that because the idea of reincarnation was so well known, Jesus didn't make a point of teaching reincarnation. A second example from the New Testament, the case of the prophet Elijah and John the Baptist. We look at Matthew 11. Jesus states unequivocally that the soul of John the Baptist was the same as that of the prophet Elijah. We read, "Truly I say to you, among those born of women, there has not arisen anyone greater than John the Baptist." If you are willing to accept it, John himself is Elijah who was to come. He who has ears to hear, let him hear. So that was the second example. Now I go to the so-called Nag Hammadi scriptures for the forgotten Gospels, and they were found in 1945 in a place called Nag Hammadi, and they are actually representing the so-called Christian Gnostic or esoteric Christianity, which adhered to the doctrines of reincarnation and to the law of cause and effect, the law of karma. And according to several researchers of the Nag Hammadi scriptures, the texts show that the Gnostics believed that man must pass through several births before reaching this final goal. An example is the text called The Secret of John, which proclaims the doctrine of reincarnation. We will now have a look at Judaism. Judaism has a number of holy books. First we have the Torah, second we have the Talmud, and third we have the Kabbalah. The Torah is a Hebrew word meaning teaching, doctrine, instruction or law. The Talmud contains the commentaries of important rabbis and other scholars, often in the form of discussions between supporters and opponents of a particular point of view. The Kabbalah is not a book or set of books, but an ancient mystical tradition. The word Kabbalah means to accept or receive a precept. The most important work in this line is the Zohar, which means splendor or brilliance. Central is the wisdom of the heart, our higher nature. It is about receiving esoteric knowledge about the divine and the universe with wisdom in our heart. It has been said that the Torah, the Talmud and the Kabbalah relate to each other as follows. The Torah is called the law, the Talmud the soul of the law, and the Kabbalah, the Jewish mysticism with its main collection, the Zohar, which is a collection of mystical commentaries of the Torah. This Kabbalah is called the soul of the law. Where do we find anything about reincarnation in the Kabbalah tradition? The concept of Gilgul appears in the Zohar. That means the revolutions of the souls, and the idea that all souls are subject to migration, or in other words, the reincarnation idea. Other essential thoughts in the Kabbalah are that a regular review is required, but when people come into this world and when they leave it, it's about karma. Trying to improve the world by making the right ethical choices. The concept that the highest in man is his inner divine core. To sum it up, the Kabbalah teaches that we will return through many incarnations until we have realized the divine in ourselves through transformation. Furthermore, an important rabbi in the 20th century, Gershom Scholem, states that many rabbis today personally assume multiple lives, but this is not yet openly taught in the mainstreams of contemporary Judaism. Then we will have a look at the Islam. What are the holy books of the Islam? Of course, we have the Holy Quran, which has been revealed to the Prophet Muhammad. But we also have the Hadiths, which are the actions and sayings of the Prophet. In Orthodox Islam, these texts are interpreted in such a way that there is no place for the doctrine of reincarnation and karma. Yet, the idea of reincarnation as a possibility is indeed included in the first principle of Muhammad's teachings. Allah means the boundless life. Allah, the boundless, is the origin of man, and thus we are without beginning. Allah is the destiny of man, and so we are also without end. So we have always existed and will always continue to exist. The doctrine of reincarnation, called Tanasuch, or transmigration of souls, was well known to the young Islam. But over time, this teaching faded into the background because the texts were often interpreted literally. This, while there are indications in the Quran itself that this is not always the idea. The Quran also speaks of the metaphorical meaning of the text. Surah 39, and we have set up for the people in this reading all kinds of parables, that they may be guided, and also that Allah sets parables for man that they may become mindful. Surah 59. In other words, that they start thinking carefully about what is written. Moreover, the Quran also states in Surah 10, "For those who do well, there is the most wonderful thing and even more. But those who have collected evil deeds, the retribution of an evil deed is its equal." In short, the idea of the law of cause and effect, the law of karma, can also be found in the Quran. Within Islam, there have always been groups, esoteric movements, that did assume the idea of reincarnation and karma. For example, in their coded poems, such as, for example, the Ismailites, the mystical Alites, the Sufis, and the Druze. The Druze and the Nusayris, who live mainly in Syria and Lebanon, still adhere to this doctrine. The Sufis, named after Sophia, wisdom, have always been a kind of connecting factor within Islam between the two mainstreams that arose as a result of the succession of Muhammad, namely the Shiites and the Sunnis. And the Sufis in particular have preserved the teaching about reincarnation well over the centuries, albeit in a hidden way. One of the greatest among the Persian mystical Sufi poets was Jalal ad-Din Rumi. His collection of poems called Masnavi is considered second in rank after the Quran and is also called the Persian Quran. In Masnavi, Rumi describes, among other things, the process of a living being over a very long evolutionary period in which more and more of the limitless faculties that every being potentially possesses are being developed. It runs as follows. I died as a mineral and became a plant. I died as a plant and rose as an animal. I died as an animal and was human. Why should I fear? When did dying make me less? Yet I will one day die as a man, to exalt myself with the blessed angels. But even then, should I continue? Everything but God perishes. From these nice lines of poetry, the idea clearly emerges that there are countless repeated re-embodiments by the same living being over different periods of time, and the progressive development or evolution that occurs. It provides a good example of Sufi thoughts on re-embodiment or reincarnation. Then we go to the wisdom literature in India, in Sanskrit. We talk about Hinduism now. This literature is so extensive that probably no person on earth has read it all. Among them are many so-called holy books. And in ancient India, we believe, they understood it well. Truth is universal, all-encompassing, and cannot be contained in one book or even in several books. Because there is always the aspect of development, of evolution, of growth. What wisdom literature is there in India? In general, there is a distinction in Indian literature between the so-called Shruti and Smriti. The Shrutis, derived from the verb shru, to hear, are the scriptures considered to have been revealed directly by the gods and have been heard by the great rishis or sages. This includes the Vedas, the oldest and holiest scriptures in India. These were first passed down orally for a very long time before they were written down by Vyasa more than 6,000 years ago. Then we have the Smritis. This word means memory. These are esoteric truths coming from people that were remembered when they passed on orally from the past by tradition. And eventually they were written down. These traditional writings include the Itihasa, the history, including the well-known epics, the Ramayana and the Mahabharata. Both epics still play a huge role in India, and even modern children can often tell you the stories in detail. They still form a basis for the psychology and ethical ideals of Indian society. A very important book is the Bhagavad Gita, the song of Lord Krishna, which is part of the Mahabharata. This is the book in India for the daily inspiration of people. While in some Western hotels the Bible is on your bedside table, in India this is the Bhagavad Gita. The Bhagavad Gita is about a conversation between Arjuna, a Pandava prince, who is about to go to war with his brothers the Kurus, and Krishna, his charioteer, who in fact symbolizes the inner higher self of man, is his spiritual divine core. In that conversation, Krishna explains how the spiritual core in us periodically re-embodies itself and reincarnates. I will give you a few fragments in which the idea of reincarnations emerges very explicitly. We first go to chapter 2. Verse 12 and 13. Krishna says, "Never was there a time when I did not exist, nor you, nor all these kings, nor in the future shall any of us cease to be." As the embodied soul continuously passes in this body, from boyhood to youth to old age, the soul similarly passes into another body at death. A wise man is not bewildered by such a change. Then we go to chapter 2, verse 22. As a person puts on new garments, giving up old ones, the soul similarly accepts new material bodies, giving up the old and useless ones. Then we go to chapter 4. And I and thou, both of us, this is what Krishna tells to Arjuna, I and thou, both of us, have passed through many lives, O Arjuna. Mine are known to me, yet thou knowest not thine, O Parantapa. So these are very explicit verses from the Bhagavad Gita where the idea of reincarnation is described. Now, as the fifth of the major traditions in the world, we go to Buddhism. Also in Buddhism, rebirth is assumed. For example, the concept of samsara is known in Buddhism. The concept of samsara indicates the continually recurring cycles of embodied existence. Cycles of birth and death, sorrow and suffering, and of joy and happiness. Buddhism indicates that there is a way through which you can escape samsara by following the path that all Buddhas have taught, by learning to live in the higher parts of your nature. It is about rising above karma. We will now have a break of 3 minutes again, where you can bring in your questions, and we will see you soon. Welcome back. Mariska, questions?
Two questions at the moment. The first question, you told about a lot of books which contain knowledge. And the question is, in the light of reincarnation, what could we do to prevent degeneration or misunderstanding?
Yeah, very important question. I think in the context of reincarnation, it is important that we keep on studying and trying to understand what has been known already for many centuries, like for instance the text in the Bhagavad Gita, but also the other traditions show that the concept reincarnation and karma has been known already for many centuries, and it goes to the background once in a while and it comes back, and studying it, but especially building up a total vision of how life is working is of utmost importance, and applying this vision on the practical problems in life is also necessary to better understand how it works, and also to spread these ideas among other people so that more people start thinking about this and realize that if you keep these ideas pure, and I mean with that you understand them correctly and also apply them correctly from the ethical point of view, that you can start taking away the effects of previous, let's say, missteps that we made as a group of people in the past, and start to reconcile if we had conflicts, start to be again a better steward of the world for all life on earth. Because if we postpone it to next incarnations, the problem will have grown bigger. So it is now time to study it, to apply it, to spread the idea among a bigger group of people on earth, so that more people start thinking and acting from the idea of reincarnation and karma, and we start actually managing to, or steering away from the let's say the polarized situation we are now often in, and that we try to reconcile groups of people, come to peaceful agreements, start to be the real steward of the world, so that we give nature the right place in our society, so make everything more harmonious now, and not postpone it to a next reincarnation, because we all reincarnate as groups, as civilizations, so we see each other again and again and again, and if you postpone solving all the major problems we have built up together, the problems will become bigger and bigger and much more difficult to manage them. So we better start now.
Sounds logical.
Yeah.
Another question is, the last question, why can humans not reincarnate as an animal?
Yeah. If we I showed you the model of man as being built up of 3 components, so a spiritual core, intermediate part, and a vehicle, the body. And for man, the characteristics of the intermediate part is that man is able to think. And that means that man is a self-conscious living being, and animals are we speak generally about all animals, are not having developed the faculty of manos, or thinking, the ability to think. They are still in an instinctual phase of development, so they develop themselves, but these are all instincts that develop. And we have passed the stage of the animal stage, so we have made a step in the kingdoms of nature from animal kingdom to human kingdom. And because we have all developed our thinking faculty, manos, the ability to think, our mind, we cannot fall back, because evolution is progressive. So it is our, let's say, our the purpose of our lives, plural, is that we further develop the ability to think, to develop the whole range of possibility that is potential there in our mind, in our manos, our ability to think. And when we come back, we will come back as a human being, because we have set the first steps in developing manas, or our faculty of being able to think. And that is why we will not enter the bodies of animals, but we will enter the body of a human being.
Well, thank you.
Yeah?
These were the questions for this
Okay,
part.
these were the questions. Thank you for your questions. We will now continue with the last part of our lecture of today. And that is about recognizing of the idea of cyclicity and reincarnation in philosophy and science.